Hare Krishna. Welcome back to the live studios here in Radha Lane, just next to Shri Shri Radha Nilamadhava Temple, largest and most beautiful temple, ISKCON in North America. The most beautiful deities, opulent deities. We're here with it's Sunday, so there's a festival going on at the temple, and the stalwarts who love to hear Srimad Bhagavatam are here with me to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. We're so happy that you're with us. Let's hear again and again and again Srila Sanatana Goswami's glorification of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Hear it attentively, meditate on just what the Bhagavatam is, so that we can hear with love and devotion and faith and without argument. Srimad Bhagavatam Mahima Stotra goes like this. Sarva Shastrabdipi Yusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhanta Ratnaja Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Srimad Bhagavata Prabho Kalidwandoditaditya Shri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Marika Bando Matsangin Madguru Man Mahadana Manistadaga Madbhagya Marananda Namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadutadayin adini chochata kada hanamuncha gadachin mam premnarit kantayospura. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we've heard about Kunti Devi's prayers to Krishna, lamenting that he was going back to Dvärakä, after solving all of their problems and praying that no more problems would come so that Krishna would stay with them. Then we heard about the passing of Bhishma Dev and how he convinced Maharaj Yudhishthira to take the throne, to sit on the throne. He was so distraught with all the suffering that had gone on after the battle of Kurukshetra, and he felt personally responsible, and therefore he refused to sit on the throne. And Krishna, Vyasadeva, his brothers, everyone, his relatives, even the women, they tried to convince him to sit on the throne. He wouldn't do it. He was Dharmaraj. He was the personification of religious principles. And finally, Krishna arranged that he go with the Pandavas and Krishna himself and Yudhishthira to see Bhishma Dev. And Bhishma Dev instructed Yudhishthira 300 chapters of the Mahabharata. Bhagavad Gita is only one chapter. Bhishma Dev's instructions is 300 chapters. That's how much Krishna thinks of Bhishma Dev. And so now we've gone on past the passing of Bhishma Dev and heard some wonderful instructions, moral instructions, and administrative instructions, all kinds of instructions for all members of society, how they should act in accordance with religious and spiritual principles, the laws of nature. Now we've reached the 10th chapter, the departure of Lord Krishna for Dvärakä. So now he's finally going to go back to Dvärakä, and we begin chapter 10 with text 13. All their hearts were melting for him on the pot of attraction. They looked at him without blinking their eyes, and they moved hither and thither in perplexity. Purport. Krishna is naturally attractive for the living beings because he is the chief eternal amongst all eternals. He alone is the maintainer of the many eternals. This is stated in the Katha Upanishad, and thus one can obtain permanent peace and prosperity by revival of one's eternal relation with him, now forgotten under the spell of Maya, the illusory energy of the Lord. Once this relation is slightly revived, the conditioned soul at once becomes freed from the illusion of material energy and becomes mad after the association of the Lord. This association is made possible not only by personal contact with the Lord, but also by association with his name, fame, form, and quality. Srimad Bhagavatam trains the conditioned soul to this state of perfection by submissive hearing from the pure devotee. Text 14. The female relatives, whose eyes were flooded with tears out of anxiety for Krishna, came out of the palace. They could stop their tears only with great difficulty. They feared that tears would cause misfortune at the time of departure. Purport. There were hundreds of ladies in the palace of Hastinapur. All of them were affectionate to Krishna. All of them were relatives also. When they saw that Krishna was going away from the palace for his native place, they were very anxious. They were very anxious for him, and as usual, tears began to roll down their cheeks. They thought at the same time that tears at that moment might be cause of misfortune for Krishna. Therefore, they wanted to check them. This was very difficult for them because the tears could not be checked. Therefore, they smeared their tears in their eyes, and their hearts throbbed. Therefore, ladies who were the wives and daughters-in-law of those who died in the battlefield never came in contact with Krishna. And thus they thought of him, talked of him, his name, fame, and so on, and became affectionate also, like those who were in direct contact. Therefore, directly or indirectly, anyone who thinks of Krishna, talks of Krishna, or worships Krishna becomes attached to him. Because Krishna is absolute, there is no difference between his name, form, quality, and so on. Our intimate relation with Krishna can be confidentially revived by our talking of, hearing of, or remembering him. It is so done due to spiritual potency. Text 15. While the Lord was departing the palace of Hastinapura, while the Lord was departing the palace of Hastinapura, different types of drums, like the mridanga, dola, nagra, dunduri, and dundubi, and flutes, like the gomukha and other instruments like venas and beris, all sounded together to show him honor. Text 16. Out of a loving desire to see the Lord, the royal ladies of the Kurus got up on the top of the palaces, and smiling with affection and shyness, they showered flowers upon the Lord. Purport. This is a real festival. Shyness is a particular extranatural beauty of the fair sex, and it commands respect from the opposite sex. Hare Krishna, Haribol, Haribol. Back at last from New York. Shyness is a particular extranatural beauty of the fair sex, just as you come in. This is what it said. And it commands respect from the opposite sex. Jairam, Shriram. Haribol, Haribol. Yeah, go a little bit so they can sit in the chairs there. Yeah, good, thank you. Shyness is a particular extranatural beauty of the fair sex, and it commands respect from the opposite sex. This custom was observed even during the days of the Mahabharata, more than 5,000 years ago. It is only the less intelligent persons, not well versed in the history of the world, who say that observance of separation of female from male is an introduction of the Mohammedan period in India. This incident from the Mahabharata period proves definitely that the ladies of the palace observed strict parda, restricted association with men. And instead of coming down in the open air where Lord Krishna and others were assembled, the ladies of the palace went up on the top of the palace, and from there paid their respect to Lord Krishna by showers of flowers. It is definitely stated here that the ladies were smiling there on the top of the palace, checked by shyness. This shyness is a gift of nature to the fair sex, and it enhances their beauty and prestige, even if they are of a less important family, or even if they are less attractive. We have practical experience of this fact. A sweeper woman commanded the respect of many respectable gentlemen simply by manifesting a lady's shyness. Half-naked ladies in the streets do not command respect, but a shy sweeper's wife commands respect from all. Human civilization, as conceived of by the sages of India, is to help one free himself from the clutches of illusion. The material beauty of a woman is an illusion because actually the body is made of earth, water, fire, air, etc. But because there is the association of the living spark with matter, it appears to be beautiful. No one is attracted by an earthen doll, even if it is most perfectly prepared to attract the attention of others. The dead body has no beauty because no one will accept the dead body of a so-called beautiful woman. Therefore, the conclusion is that the spirit spark is beautiful, and because of the soul's beauty, one is attracted by the beauty of the outward body. The Vedic wisdom therefore forbids us to be attracted by false beauty. But because we are now in the darkness of ignorance, the Vedic civilization allows very restricted mixing of woman and man. They say that the woman is considered to be the fire, and man is considered to be the butter. The butter must melt in association with fire, and therefore they may be brought together only when it is necessary. And shyness is a check to the unrestricted mixing. It is nature's gift, and it must be utilized. Text 17. At that time, Arjuna, the great warrior and conqueror of sleep, who was the intimate friend of the most beloved Supreme Lord, took up an umbrella which had a handle of jewels and was embroidered with lace and pearls. Purport. Gold, jewels, pearls, and valuable stones were used in the luxurious royal ceremonies. They are all nature's gifts and are produced by the hills, oceans, and so on, by the order of the Lord. When man does not waste his valuable time in producing unwanted things in the name of necessities, when by so-called development of industrial enterprises, they are now using pots of gata pritcha instead of metals like gold, silver, brass, and copper. They are using margarine instead of purified butter, and 1/4 of the city population has no shelter. That was before it started to happen in America. Text 18. Uddhava and Satyaki began to fan the Lord with decorated fans, and the Lord, as the master of Madhu, seated on scattered flowers, commanded them along the road. Text 19. Here and there were heard the benedictions being paid to Krsna, which were neither befitting nor unbefitting, because they were all for the Absolute, who was now playing the part of a human being. Purport. At places, there were sounds of Vedic benediction aiming at the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. The benedictions were fitting in the sense that the Lord was playing the part of a human being, as if a cousin of Maharaj Yudhishthira. But they were also unfitting because the Lord is absolute and has nothing to do with any kind of material relativities. He is nirguna, or there are no material qualities in him, but he is full of transcendental qualities. In the transcendental world, there is nothing contradictory, whereas in the relative world, everything has its opposite. In the relative world, white is the opposite of Kep's conception of black, but in the transcendental world, there is no distinction between white and black. Therefore, the sounds of benedictions uttered by the learned Brahmanas here and there appear to be contradictory in relation with the Absolute Person. But when they are applied to the Absolute Person, they lose all contradiction and become transcendental. One example may clear this idea. Lord Sri Krishna is sometimes described as a thief. He is famous amongst his pure devotees as the Makanachora. He used to steal butter from the houses of neighbors in Vrindavana in his early age. Since then, he is famous as a thief. But in spite of his being famous as a thief, he is worshipped as a thief. Whereas in the mundane world, the thief is punished and is never praised. Since he is the absolute person, Supreme Personality of Godhead, everything is applicable to him. And still, in spite of all contradictions, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 20. Absorbed in the thought of the transcendental qualities of the Lord, who is glorified in select poetry, the ladies on the roofs of all the houses of Hastinapura began to talk of him. This talk was more attractive than the hymns of the Vedas. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that in all the Vedic literatures, the goal is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Factually, the glories of the Lord are depicted in such literature as the Vedas, Ramayana, and Mahabharata. And in the Bhagavatam, they are specifically mentioned in respect to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, while the ladies on the tops of the houses in the capital of the kings of the Kuru dynasty were talking about the Lord, their talk was more pleasing than the Vedic hymns. Anything sung in the praise of the Lord is Shruti mantra. There are songs of Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur, or Narottam Das, one of the acharyas in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, composed in simple Bengali language. But Thakur Vishwanath Chakravarti, another very learned acharya of the same Sampradaya, has approved the songs of Thakur Narottam Das to be as good as Vedic mantras. And this is so because of the subject matter. The language is immaterial, but the subject matter is important. The ladies, who are all absorbed in the thought and actions of the Lord, develop the consciousness of Vedic wisdom by the grace of the Lord. And therefore, although such ladies might not have been very learned scholars in Sanskrit or otherwise, still whatever they spoke was more attractive than the Vedic hymns. The Vedic hymns in the Upanishads are sometimes indirectly directed to the Supreme Lord, but the talks of the ladies were directly spoken of the Lord, and thus they were more pleasing to the heart. The ladies' talks appeared to be more valuable than the learned Brahmanas' benedictions. Text 21. They said, here he is, the original personality of Godhead as we definitely remember him. He alone existed before the manifested creation of the modes of nature, and in him only, because he is the Supreme Lord, all living beings merge as if sleeping at night, their energy suspended. Purport. There are two types of dissolution of the manifested cosmos. At the end of every 4,320,000,000 years, solar years, when Brahma, the Lord of one particular universe, goes to sleep, there is one annihilation. And at the end of Lord Brahma's life, which takes place at the end of Brahma's 100 years of age, in our calculation, at the end of 8,640,000,000 times 30 times 12 times 100 solar years, there is complete annihilation of the entire universe. And in both the periods, both the material energy, called the Mahatattva, and the marginal energy, called Jivatattva, merge in the person of the Supreme Lord. The living beings remain asleep within the body of the Lord until there is another creation of the material world, another creation of the material world. And that is the way of the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material manifestation. The material creation is effected by the interaction of the three modes of material nature set in action by the Lord. And therefore it is said here that the Lord existed before the modes of material nature were set in motion. In the Shruti mantra, it is said that only Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, existed before the creation, and there was no Brahma, Shiva, or other demigods. Vishnu means the Mahavishnu, who is lying on the causal ocean. By his breathing only, all the universes are generated in seeds and gradually develop into gigantic forms with innumerable planets within each and every universe. The seeds of universes develop into gigantic forms in the way seeds of a banyan tree develop into numberless banyan trees. This Mahavishnu is the plenary portion of the Lord Sri Krishna, who is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita as follows. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the original personality of Godhead, Govinda, whose plenary portion is the Mahavishnu. All the Brahmas, the heads of the universes, live only for the period of his exhaling, after the universes are generated from the pores of his transcendental body. Thus Govinda, or Lord Krishna, is the cause of Mahavishnu also. The ladies talking about this Vedic truth must have heard it from authoritative sources. An authoritative source is the only means of knowing about transcendental subject matter, definitely. There is no alternative. The merging of the living beings into the body of Mahavishnu takes place automatically at the end of Brahma's 100 years. But that does not mean that the individual living being loses his identity. The identity is there, and as soon as there is another creation by the supreme will of the Lord, all the sleeping, inactive living beings are again let loose to begin their activities in the continuation of past different spheres of life. It is called Suptotita Naya, or awakening from sleep and again engaging in one's respective continuous duty. When a man is asleep at night, he forgets himself, what he is, what his duty is, and everything of his waking state. But as soon as he awakens from slumber, he remembers all that he has to do and thus engages himself again in his prescribed duties. Last night I had this dream, and I was going to the airport, long trip to the airport from someplace in India to, and then I realized I didn't pack my bag. I was going there just, like complete anxiety. Well, now what am I going to do? And it lasted for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden I woke up. Oh, what a relief. I'm not going to the airport. I didn't forget to pack my bag. Everything's okay. That's it. It's just like that, material existence. And things are coming and going, and sometimes they're good, and sometimes they're bad, and sometimes they're horrible. And it just keeps going on, flow of activities of this material world. But as soon as he awakens from slumber, he remembers all that he has to do, and thus engages himself again in his prescribed activities. The living beings also remain merged in the body of Mahavishnu during the period of annihilation. But as soon as there is another creation, they arise to take up their unfinished work. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8:18 through 20. The Lord existed before the creative energy was set in action. The Lord is not a product of the material energy. His body is completely spiritual, and there is no difference between his body and himself. Before creation, the Lord remained in his abode, which is absolute and one. Text 22. That personality of Godhead, again desiring to give names and forms to his parts and parcels, the living entities, placed them under the guidance of material nature. By his own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. Purport. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord. They are of two varieties, namely Nitya Mukta and Nitya Baddha. The Nitya Muktas are eternally liberated souls, and they are eternally engaged in the reciprocation of transcendental, loving service with the Lord in his eternal abode beyond the manifested, mundane creations. But the Nitya Baddha, or eternally conditioned souls, are entrusted to its external energy, Maya, for rectification of their rebellious attitude toward the Supreme Father. Nitya Baddhas are eternally forgetful of their relation with the Lord as parts and parcels. They are bewildered by the illusory energy as products of matter, and thus they are very busy in making plans in the material world for becoming happy. They go on merrily with plans, but by the will of the Lord, both the plan makers and the plans are annihilated at the end of a certain period, as above mentioned. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita as follows. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all living entities merge into my nature, and again, when the time of creation is ripe, I begin creation by the agency of my external energy. The word bhuyaha indicates again and again. That is to say, the process of creation, maintenance, and annihilation is going on perpetually by the external energy of the Lord. He is the cause of everything, but the living beings, who are constitutionally part and parcel of the Lord and are forgetful of the sweet relation, are given a chance again and again to get rid of the clutches of the external energy and to revive the living being's consciousness. The revealed scriptures are also created by the Lord. Vedic literatures are the guiding directions for the conditioned souls so that they can get free from the repetition of creation and annihilation of the material world and the material body. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, this created world and material energy are under my control. Under the influence of Prakriti, automatically they are created again and again, and this is done by me through the agency of my external energy. Actually, The spiritual spark, living entities, have no material names or forms. But in order to fulfill their desire to lord it over the material energy of material forms and names, they are given a chance for such false enjoyment, and at the same time they are given a chance to understand the real position through the revealed scriptures. The foolish and forgetful living being is always busy with false forms and false names. Modern nationalism is the culmination of such false names and false forms. Men are mad after false name and form. The form of body obtained under certain conditions is taken up as factual, and the name also taken bewilders the conditioned soul into misusing the energy in the name of so many isms. The scriptures, however, supply the clue for understanding the real position, but men are reluctant to take lessons from the scriptures created by the Lord for different places and times. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is the guiding principle for every human being, but by the spell of material energy, they do not take care to carry out the programs of life in terms of the Bhagavad Gita. Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study of knowledge for one who has thoroughly understood the principles of the Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, people have no taste for them, and therefore they are under the clutches of Maya for repetition of birth and death. Text 23. Here is the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose transcendental form is experienced by the great devotees, who are completely cleansed of material consciousness by dint of rigid devotional service and full control of life and the senses. And that is the only way to purify existence. Purport. As it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord can be known in His real nature by dint of pure devotional service only. So it is stated here that only the great devotees of the Lord, who are able to clear the mind of all material dust by rigid devotional service, can experience the Lord as He is. Jitendriya means one who has full control over the senses. The senses are active parts of the body, and their activities cannot be stopped. The artificial means of the yogic processes to make the senses inactive has proved to be an abject failure, even in the case of great yogis like Vishwamitra Muni. Vishwamitra Muni controlled the senses by yogic trance, but when he happened to meet Menaka, a heavenly society woman, he became a victim of sex, and the artificial way of controlling the senses failed. But in the case of a pure devotee, the senses are not at all artificially stopped from doing anything, but they are given different good engagements. When the senses are engaged in more attractive activities, there is no chance of their being attracted by any inferior engagements. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that the senses can be controlled only by better engagements. Devotional service necessitates purifying the senses or engaging them in the activities of devotional service. Devotional service is not inaction. Anything done in the service of the Lord becomes at once purified of its material nature. The material conception is due to ignorance only. There is nothing beyond Vasudeva. The Vasudeva conception gradually develops in the heart of the learned by a prolonged acceleration of the receptive organs. But the process ends in the knowledge of accepting Vasudeva as all in all. In the case of devotional service, this very same method is accepted from the very beginning, and by the grace of the Lord, all factual knowledge becomes revealed in the heart of a devotee, due to dictation by the Lord from within. Therefore, controlling the senses by devotional service is the only and easiest method. Text 24. Oh dear friends, here is that very personality of Godhead, who is attractive and confidential pastimes are described in the confidential parts of the Vedic literature by his great devotees. It is he only who creates, maintains, and annihilates the material world, and yet remains unaffected. Purport. As it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, all the Vedic literatures are glorifying the greatness of Lord Sri Krishna. Here it is confirmed in the Bhagavatam also. The Vedas are expanded by many branches and sub-branches by great devotees and empowered incarnations of the Lord, like Vyasa, Narada, Shukadeva Goswami, the Kumaras, Kapila, Prahlada, Janaka, Bali, and Yamaraja. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam, especially, the confidential parts of his activities are described by the confidential devotee, Shukadeva Goswami. In the Vedanta Sutras, or Upanishads, there is only a hint of the confidential parts of his pastimes. In such Vedic literatures as the Upanishads, the Lord has expressively been distinguished from the mundane conception of his existence. His identity being fully spiritual, his form, name, quality, and paraphernalia, etc., have been elaborately distinguished from matter, and therefore he is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent persons as impersonal. But factually, he is the Supreme Person, Bhagavan, and he is partially represented as Paramatma, or impersonal Brahman. Text 25. Whenever there are kings and administrators living like animals in the lowest modes of existence, the Lord in his transcendental form manifests his supreme power, the truth positive, shows special mercy to the faithful, performs wonderful activities, and manifests various transcendental forms as is necessary in different periods and ages. Purport. As mentioned above, the cosmic creation is the property of the Supreme Lord. This is the basic philosophy of Ishopanishad. Everything is the property of the Supreme Being. No one should encroach upon the property of the Supreme Lord. One should accept only what is kindly awarded by him. Therefore, the earth or any other planet or universe is the absolute property of the Lord. The living beings are certainly his parts and parcels, or sons, and thus every one of them has a right to live at the mercy of the Lord, to execute his prescribed work. No one, therefore, can encroach upon the right of another individual man or animal without being so sanctioned by the Lord. The king or the administrator is the representative of the Lord to look after the management of the Lord's will. He must therefore be a recognized person, like Maharaj Yudhishthira or Parikshit. Such kings have full responsibility and knowledge from authorities about the administration of the world. But at times, due to the influence of the ignorant modes of material nature, tamaguna, the lowest of the material modes, kings and administrators come into power without knowledge and responsibility. And such foolish administrators live like animals for the sake of their own personal interests. The result is that the whole atmosphere becomes surcharged with anarchy and vicious elements. You read the headlines lately? Anybody? The result is that the whole atmosphere becomes surcharged with anarchy and vicious elements. Nepotism, bribery, cheating, aggression, and therefore famine, epidemic, war, and similar other nepotism, bribery, cheating, aggression. This sounds like the White House. I mean, what's going on here?
The previous one too.
Yeah. nepotism, bribery, cheating, aggression, and therefore famine, epidemic, war, and similar other disturbing features become prominent in human society. And the devotees of the Lord or the faithful are persecuted by all means. All these symptoms indicate the time of an incarnation of the Lord to re-establish the principles of religion and to vanquish the maladministrators. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. This is also confirmed where? Just checking. Just checking. See if you're still here. Just see if you're not like wandering around somewhere in the universe while you're sitting here. The Lord then appears in his transcendental form without any tinge of material qualities. He descends just to keep the state of his creation in a normal condition. What state?
Normal.
In a normal condition. The normal condition is that the Lord has provided each and every planet with all the needs of the native living beings. They can happily live and execute their predestined occupations to attain salvation at the end, following the rules and regulations mentioned in the revealed scriptures. The material world is created to satisfy the whims of the Nityabada, or everlastingly conditioned souls, just as naughty boys are provided with playing cradles. Otherwise, there was no need of the material world. But when they become intoxicated with the power of material science to exploit the resources unlawfully without the sanction of the Lord, and that also only for sense gratification, there is necessity of the Lord's incarnation to chastise the rebellious and protect the faithful. When he descends, he exhibits superhuman acts just to prove his supreme right, and materialists like Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, and Kamsa are sufficiently punished. He acts in a manner which no one can imitate. For example, the Lord, when he appeared as Rama, bridged the Indian Ocean. When he appeared as Krishna, from his very childhood, he showed superhuman activities like killing Putana, Agasura, Shakatashura, Kalya, etc. And then his maternal uncle Kamsa. When he was at Dvärakä, he married 16,108 queens, and all of them were blessed with a sufficient number of children. The sum total of his personal family members amounted to about 10 million. Huh?
This one says 100,000.
No, this is the correction.
This is the first edition.
16,108
That's yes.
times 10
Okay. So they have an
times 10 times 10. Yeah. And again, during his lifetime, he managed to vanquish them all. He is famous as the Govardhan Dari Hari because he lifted at the age of only 7 the hill known as Govardhan. The Lord killed many undesirable kings in his time, and as a Kshatriya, he fought chivalrously. He is famous as the Asamordva, unparalleled. No one is equal to or greater than him. Text 26. Oh, how supremely glorified is the dynasty of King Yadu, and how virtuous is the land of Mathura, where the supreme leader of all living beings, the husband of the goddess of fortune, has taken his birth and wandered in his childhood. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna has expressively given a description of his transcendental appearance, disappearance, and activities. The Lord appears in a particular family or place by his inconceivable potency. He does not take his birth as a conditioned soul, quits his body, and accepts another body. His birth is like the appearance and disappearance of the sun. The sun arises on the eastern horizon, but that does not mean that the eastern horizon is the parent of the sun. The sun is existent in every part of the solar system, but he becomes visible at a scheduled time and so also becomes invisible at another scheduled time. Similarly, the Lord appears in this universe like the sun, and again leaves our sight at another time. He exists at all times and at every place, but by His causeless mercy, when He appears before us, we take it for granted that He has taken His birth. Anyone who can understand this truth in terms of the statements of revealed scriptures certainly becomes liberated just after quitting the present body. Liberation is obtainable after many births and after great endeavor in patience and perseverance, in knowledge and renunciation. But simply by knowing in truth about the Lord's transcendental births and activities, one can get liberation at once. Pretty good deal. That is the verdict of the Bhagavad Gita. But those who are in the darkness of ignorance conclude that the Lord's birth and activities in the material world are similar to those of the ordinary living being. Such imperfect conclusions cannot give anyone liberation. His birth, therefore, in the family of King Yadu as the son of King Vasudeva, and his transfer into the family of Nanda Maharaja in the land of Mathura, are all transcendental arrangements made by the internal potency of the Lord. The fortunes of the Yadu dynasty and that of the inhabitants of the land of Mathura cannot be materially estimated. If simply by knowing the transcendental nature of the birth and activities of the Lord one can get liberation easily, we can just imagine what is in store for those who actually enjoyed the company of the Lord in person, as a family member or as a neighbor. All those who were fortunate enough to associate with the Lord, the husband of the goddess of fortune, certainly obtained something more than what is known as liberation. Therefore, rightly, the dynasty and land are both ever glorious by the grace of the Lord. Text 27. Undoubtedly, it is wonderful that Dvärakä has defeated the glories of the heavenly planets and has enhanced the celebrity of the earth. The inhabitants of Dvärakä are always seeing the soul of all living beings, Krsna, in his loving feature. He glances at them and favors them with sweet smiles. Purport. The heavenly planets are inhabited by demigods like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, and Vayu, and the pious souls reach there after performance of many virtuous acts on earth. Modern scientists agree that the timing arrangement in the higher planetary systems is different from that of Earth. Thus it is understood from the revealed scriptures that the duration of life there is 10,000 years by our calculations. 6 months on Earth is equal to 1 day on the heavenly planets. Facilities of enjoyment are also similarly enhanced, and the beauty of the inhabitants is legendary. Common men on the earth are very much fond of reaching the heavenly planets because they have heard that comforts of life are far greater than on the earth. They are now trying to reach the moon by spacecraft. Considering all this, the heavenly planets are more celebrated than the earth. But the celebrity of earth has defeated that of the heavenly planets because of Dvärakä, where Lord Sri Krishna reigned as king. 3 places, namely Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dvärakä, are more important than the famous planets within the universe. These places are perpetually sanctified because whenever the Lord descends on earth, he displays his transcendental activities, particularly in these 3 places. They are perpetually the holy lands of the Lord, and the inhabitants still take advantage of the holy places, even though the Lord is now out of their sight. The Lord is the soul of all living beings. and he desires always to have all the living beings in their Swarupa, in their constitutional position, to participate in transcendental life in his association. His attractive features and sweet smiles go deep into the heart of everyone. And once it is so done, the living being is admitted into the kingdom of God, from which no one returns. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. The heavenly planets may be very famous for offering better facilities for material enjoyment, but as we learn from the Bhagavad Gita 9, 20, 21, one has to come back again to the earth planet as soon as the acquired virtue is finished. Dvärakä is certainly more important than the heavenly planets, because whoever has been favored with the smiling glance of the Lord shall never come back again to this rotten earth, which is certified by the Lord himself as a place of misery. Not only this earth, but also all the planets of the universes are places of misery, because in none of the planets within the universe is there eternal life, eternal bliss, and eternal knowledge. Any person engaged in the devotional service of the Lord is recommended to live in one of the above mentioned three places, namely Dvärakä, Mathura, or Vrindavana. Because devotional service in these three places is magnified, those who go there to follow the principles in terms of instructions imparted in the revealed scriptures surely achieve the same result as obtained during the presence of Lord Sri Krishna. His abode and he himself are identical, and a pure devotee, under the guidance of another experienced devotee, can obtain all the results, even at present. Hare Krishna. Text 28. Oh friends, this is now still this is the queens and the ladies in the palace in Hastinapura, still just talking about Krishna. Imagine. Oh friends, just think of his wives whose hands he has accepted. How they must have undergone vows, baths, fire sacrifices, and perfect worship of the Lord and of the universe, to constantly relish now the nectar from his lips by kissing. The damsels of Brajabhumi would often faint just by expecting such favors. Purport. Religious rites prescribed in the scriptures are meant to purify the mundane qualities of the conditioned souls, to enable them to be gradually promoted to the stage of rendering transcendental service under the Supreme Lord. Attainment of this stage is pure spiritual life. Attainment of this stage of pure spiritual life is the highest perfection, and this stage is called Sarupa, or the factual identity of the living being. Liberation means renovation of this stage of Sarupa. In that perfect stage of Sarupa, the living being is established in 5 phases of loving service, one of which is the stage of Madhurya Rasa, or the humor of conjugal love. The Lord is always perfect in himself, and thus he has no hankering for himself. He, however, becomes a master, a friend, a son, or a husband to fulfill the intense love of the devotee concerned. Herein 2 classes of devotees of the Lord are mentioned in the stage of conjugal love. One is Swakhiya, and the other is Parakhiya. Both of them are in conjugal love with the personality of Godhead Krishna. The queens at Dvärakä were Swakhiya, or duly married wives, but the damsels of Braja were young friends of the Lord while he was unmarried. The Lord stayed at Vrindavana until the age of 16, and his friendly relations with the neighboring girls were in terms of Parakhiya. These girls, as well as the queens, underwent severe penances by taking vows, bathing, and offering sacrifices in the fire, as prescribed in the scriptures. The rites, as they are not an end in themselves, nor are fruitive action, culture of knowledge, or perfection and mystic powers ends in themselves. They are all means to attain to the highest stage of Sarupa, to render constitutional, transcendental service to the Lord. Each and every living being has his individual position in one of the above-mentioned 5 different kinds of reciprocating means with the Lord. And in one's pure spiritual form of Sarupa, the relation becomes manifest, without mundane affinity. The kissing of the Lord, either by his wives or by his young girlfriends who aspire to have the Lord as their fiancé, is not of any mundane perverted quality. Had such things been mundane, a liberated soul like Shukadev would not have taken the trouble to relish them. Nor would Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu have been inclined to participate in those subjects after renouncing worldly life. The stage is earned after many lives of penance. Text 29. The children of these ladies are Pradyumna, Samba, Amba, and so on. Ladies like Rukmini, Satyabhama, and Jambavati were forcibly taken away by him from their Swayamvara ceremonies after he defeated many powerful kings headed by Shishupala. And other ladies were also forcibly taken away by him after he killed Bhaumasura and thousands of his assistants. All of these ladies are glorious. Purport. Exceptionally qualified daughters of powerful kings were allowed to make a choice of their own bridegrooms in open competition, and such ceremonies were called Swayamvara, or personal selection of the bridegroom. Because the Swayamvara was an open competition between the rival and valiant princes, such princes were invited by the father of the princess, and usually there were regular fights between the invited princely order and the sporting spirits. But it so happened that sometimes the belligerent princes were killed in such marriage fighting, and the victorious prince was offered the trophy princess for whom so many princes died. Rukmini, the principal queen of Lord Krishna, was the daughter of the king of Vidarbha, who wished that his qualified and beautiful daughter be given away to Lord Krishna. But her eldest brother wanted her to be given away to King Shishupala, who happened to be a cousin of Krishna. So there was open competition, and as usual, Lord Krishna emerged successful. After harassing Shishupala and other princes by his unrivaled prowess. Rukmini had 10 sons, like Pradyumna. There were other queens also taken away by Lord Krishna in a similar way. Full description of this beautiful booty of Lord Krishna will be given in the 10th canto. There were 16,100 beautiful girls who were daughters of many kings and were forcibly stolen by Bhaumasura, who kept them captive for his carnal desire. These girls prayed piteously to Lord Krishna for their deliverance, and the merciful Lord, called by their fervent prayer, released them all by fighting and killing Bhaumasura. All these captive princesses were then accepted by the Lord as his wives, although in the estimation of society they were all fallen girls. The all-powerful Lord Krishna accepted the humble prayers of these girls and married them with the adoration of queens. So altogether, Lord Krishna had 16,108 queens at Dvärakä, and in each of them he begot 10 children. All these children grew up, and each had as many children as their father. The aggregate of the family numbered 10 million. So it went from 100,000 to 1 million to 10 million. Maybe it was different phases. Who knows? Text 30. All these women auspiciously glorified their lives despite their being without individuality and without purity. Their husbands, the lotus-eyed personality of Godhead, never left them alone at home. You hear that, ladies? Eh? Makes more sense. Take Krishna. I'll read that again. All these women auspiciously glorified their lives despite their being without individuality and without purity. Their husband, the lotus-eyed personality of Godhead, never left them alone at home. He always pleased their hearts by making valuable presentations. Purport. The devotees of the Lord are purified souls. As soon as the devotees surrender under the lotus feet of the Lord sincerely, the Lord accepts them, and thus the devotees at once become free from all material contamination. Such devotees are above the three modes of material nature. There is no bodily disqualification of a devotee, just as there is no qualitative difference between the Ganges water and the filthy drain water when they are amalgamated. Women, merchants, and laborers are not very intelligent, and thus it is very difficult for them to understand the science of God or to be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. They are more materialistic, and less than them are Kiratas, Hunas, Andras, Pulindras, Pukashas, Abhiras, Kankas, Yavanas, Kasas, and so on. But all of them can be delivered if they are properly engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. By engagement in the service of the Lord, the designated disqualifications are removed, and as pure souls, they become eligible to enter into the kingdom of God. The fallen girls under the clutches of Bhaumasura sincerely prayed to Lord Sri Krishna for their deliverance, and their sincerity of purpose made them at once pure by virtue of devotion. The Lord therefore accepted them as his wives, and thus their lives became glorified. Such auspicious glorification was still more glorified when the Lord played with them as the most devoted husband. The Lord used to live with his 16,108 wives constantly. He expanded himself into 16,108 plenary portions, and each and every one of them was the Lord himself, without deviation from the original personality. The Shruti mantra affirms that the Lord can expand himself into many. As husband of so many wives, he pleased them with presentations, even at a costly endeavor. He brought the Parijata plant from heaven and implanted it in the palace of Satyabhama, one of the principal queens. If, therefore, anyone desires the Lord to become one's husband, the Lord fulfills such desires in full. Hare Krishna. Okay, we'll stop our reading there. Oh, wait a second. We only got one more verse. One more verse. Text 31. While the ladies of the capital, Hastinapura, were greeting him and talking in this way, the Lord, smiling, accepted their good feelings, and casting the grace of his glance over them, he departed from the city. Hare Krishna. So we'll end there. All right, it comes time for the most favorite part of my most favorite part of the readings, the reflections of this great souls. Anything that stuck out in your mind you want to discuss? There's lots of subject matters in this section that I'm sure some would like to discuss. Yes, Sarva.
I didn't quite understand.
Sarva didn't quite understand. This I find hard to believe, Sarva, that there's anything that you can't quite understand. Text 30. The exalted women without any duality.
All these women auspiciously glorify their lives despite their being without individuality and without purity. Seems like kind of Krishna said.
Let's read it again. All these women auspiciously glorified their lives despite their being without individuality and without purity. So here's the thing. they were kidnapped by Bomasar, and they were kept by him for his pleasure. And therefore, in the eyes of society, this is the text, the context, in the eyes of society, even though they may have been pure and had the qualities given by the feminine qualities in the Bhagavad Gita, they were considered to be, just like Sita was considered to be impure by some of the subjects, even though she was so tested and she came out completely pure. You know, Maya's Sita went in the fire and the real Sita came out, that was it. Everybody said, right. But still, they were low-class people and who criticized, you know. And Lord Rama, who came just to show what the perfect king is and how the perfect king acts, he sent her away to satisfy the people, satisfy the citizens. So in terms of not having individuality, because when they were put together underneath that shelter of that demon, they lost their individual existences. They were just put in this big pool full of, in a prison. That's the meaning. Is that okay?
More than I can say now.
Thanks. Hare Krishna. Yes, Hannah. This line says he pleased them all with presentations, even at a costly endeavor. You want to know what that means?
Yes. He brought the
It means costly endeavor means, this is Srila Prabhupada's English was very, very poetic. And he learned English, in Scottish Church College in Calcutta in British Raj days. So a lot of his English is influenced by that era of English, which is a little different than American English, and English anywhere else. For that matter, for now, they didn't go running around saying "Yo, dog," to each other. Or, man, you're really sick. Man, that was sick. Did you hear that? That's sick. When I was growing up, even it was cool, or it was something else, but sick, that meant something else. Anyway, poetic language. So, read it again. O costly endeavor means that he had to go out of his way and do something incredible to satisfy some of his wives with things that he wanted, what they wanted. Who's the husband here who hasn't had to do that? Is there anyone? Anyone? It's not unusual. It's not unusual.
In other words, he took very good care of them.
Yeah.
But they only wanted him, right?
They were women, and they wanted parijata flowers and palaces and all kinds of things.
This should not need to be explained to you.
I don't want anything.
She's a saint,
Okay. That's in the lifetime.
saintly person. Yeah. So like that, but the point is that Krishna, he pleases everyone. And even the demons, he cuts their heads off, and he pleases them by giving them liberation.
But it says also in other places that anyone who is a devotee to him, he benefits that for general state.
Yeah, but even if they're not devotees of him, if they become inimical enough, not that we should imitate that, and to try to get so inimical to him that he'll kill us. Most of the demons who get killed by Krishna in that way, they get some kind of liberation, but generally they don't get their own original forms in the spiritual world. But some of them did, who became prominent enough and were thinking of Krishna's form enough all throughout their lives, would get that kind of liberation.
Do they keep coming back until they finally get it? Then they're not destroyed, are they?
No, they go back to the spiritual world. Krishna is absolute. Everything he does is absolute. He's not inimical to anyone. He doesn't have friends and enemies. People have are his enemies sometimes because they're envious of him, but he doesn't see them as enemies.
There is no, what did the statement say earlier here, that in the transcendental world there is no black or white.
Yes. And therefore, when he says Pritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chiduskinam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge, he comes in every in every millennium, in every yuga, in some form or another, to protect his devotees and give them shelter and to annihilate or take care of, the atheists and demons. But when he does that, they get benefit. But Krishna is special, even more special than his expansions and his plenary portions and incarnations. He's the original. All of those incarnations are within the body of Krishna. They all come from Krishna originally, eventually. So therefore, he appears in all these different places, in different forms and in different ways, because there are devotees who are naturally inclined to worship in those ways, in those moods. He's Bhakti Akila Rasamrita Sindhu. Akila Rasamrita Sindhu. He's the reservoir of all rasas. All rasas are contained within him. And therefore, whatever relationship you want to have with the Lord, Krishna can deliver fully. Whereas us, we can't deliver anything. Oh, well, something, but not much. Therefore, our attempts to get our satisfaction from anyone else except for him is less intelligent.
Is an individual with a core fund of knowledge.
Yes, correct. You're learning the books. Yes. Hannah, go for it.
I liked this part of this report. It said, when the senses are engaged in more attractive activities, there is no chance of their being attracted by any inferior engagements. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the senses can be controlled only by better engagements. Sometimes, when I get in a bad mood, and I just chant or read my Bhagavad Gita, it's like a switch.
Transformed.
Yes.
Transformed, yeah.
Those are inferior.
And the same idea is applied to renunciation. Because, what can we renounce? Nothing belongs to us in the first place. And Prabhupada used the example. Someone goes into a Bank of America branch and announces to everyone, I renounce all this money. Everybody would just, put him in a little car and, caged vehicle and take him to the doghouse or to the insane asylum or something. Nothing belongs to you, so who are you to renounce all the money in the Bank of America or anywhere?
That's why you laughed at me one time when I said, I am not, but there's nothing in the world that entices me. I've seen enough in heaven, I'm not interested in that. And you laughed. You laughed because I think it's because, how can I renounce that which I do not own?
Exactly.
I did not realize, now
Precisely.
Light comes on.
Bingo, bing,
Okay.
light goes on. Bing.
The light bulb moment.
Oh, really? But this depends on our, our inclination. It depends on our desire, basically. Krishna is so kind. He's fulfilling all our desires, not just anybody's. Everyone's desires is fulfilled by Krishna.
So my desire to learn this and then be able to teach it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
But it needs to be correct.
But you have to be qualified in your behavior also, becoming a teacher of Bhagavatam is not the same, it's not academic research, it's not an academic process whereby you teach in a, anyway, you have to be, your example, your character, your spiritual, your activities, your character has to be pure. And then you can preach Bhagavatam, and then you can spread Krishna consciousness, and there's no taste like that.
Someone like myself who has obligations to complete, who is in the process of doing that, is that person capable of learning it?
Anybody is capable of
I
learning
mean,
it.
to be able to teach what I...
Anyone is capable of learning it, from any position. Anyone is capable of learning it, and anyone is capable of teaching it, from any position.
Okay.
And you can apply it in your work.
That's why I'm asking. I don't know, I'm just seeking information.
Time will tell, time will reveal.
It's saying the teacher learns more than the student.
Yeah.
If you try to present something in an honest way, it will help on Krishna heart.
Yeah, there's a saying also, teach to learn. Teach to learn.
You cannot teach that which you have not learned, or are continuing.
Yeah, and real knowledge begins with humility. That's the version of Krishna in the 13th chapter of the Gita. Knowledge begins with humility. Because without humility you can't receive anything. And without full humility you can't receive everything. So the materialistic mentality is just the opposite. You know, to try to act in such a way that everyone will think that we're the greatest. But this, anyway. Hare Krishna. Okay, I'm going to get a little rest now because I got this extra thing that's going on in my system that needs to be healed. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Hare Krishna. And thank you all for coming in from cyberspace. And I want you to notice that the reception is better now. We haven't had any problems.
Right.
That's right, a lot better. And all the bars in my phone are better. So the divine couple downstairs were using a lot of bandwidth. These guys were big-time bandwidth users, you know. Oh yeah. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Samaveta Bhaktabinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories.